Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I will be doing my May wrap-up. I'll be talking about all of the books that I managed to get to in the month of May. So May was a very interesting reading month for me. Very atypical for me for a number of reasons, which I'll get into as I explain what I've read and all of that jazz. But basically the main reason why I haven't read it nearly as much in May as I normally would like to is because the last 10 days or so in May, my girlfriend Sadie from Canada was visiting me in Virginia. Suffice it to say, we did not get a lot of reading done like we thought we would, and it definitely shows. And so for the month of May, I haven't read like a lot like I normally would, and a lot of the books that I ended up picking up this month, I ended up DNFing. I had 4 DNFs this month, which is way more than I usually have. And yeah, I just kept picking up books and I was like, you know what? This is just not for me. But I did end up managing to read a lot of great books, which I'll talk about at the very end. And then there's a couple books that I started in the month of May that will have to carry over into June, and that's how I'll end the video. But enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So let's go ahead and get the DNFs out of the way. The books that I started that I just could not get into, and like I said, I had 4 of them this month, which is very unusual. One of them was Jazz by Toni Morrison. You know what, I didn't really have too many expectations for this book, but I thought I would enjoy it. And she has a lot of great books. I don't think this is one of her more popular ones. Like if you go on Goodreads, I think Beloved and The Bluest Eye have a lot more ratings. But I wanted to check it out just 'cause, I mean, I like jazz. So that's a dumb reason, but I jumped into it thinking I would enjoy it, but I read the first chapter, I really was not impressed, and then I got like halfway through the second chapter, and I just realized that her writing style and the way she's telling the story just did not grasp me, and I just really couldn't get into it, so sadly enough, that's a DNF. And then a book that I bought while Stacy was here at Second and Charles that looked pretty interesting was The Ghost Variations by Kevin Brockmeyer. And this is supposed to be like 100 short stories. And so it's very short, and all the stories are literally like 2 pages. And I took this to the beach one day when me and Stacy went to the beach. And I started reading it, and I read like 3 or 4 of the short stories, and they were not good. I couldn't tell you a thing about them. They're super literary. They're super boring. And the main reason I picked the book was because Stacy pointed out, oh, look, there's a drum on the cover. Gotta pick it up, right? So I read the story that has, oh, I flipped right to it. That is weird. I flipped right to it. There's a story with a drum symbol on it. So I was like, okay, I'll read this one, and if it's not good, I won't read the rest of it. Not a damn drum in that story. What the fuck? So yeah, that's $7 I will never be getting back. DNFing it, unhauling it, garbage. And then sadly enough, I had 2 more DNFs. One of them was Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blah. And I was super excited for this book because my buddy Sharon Dwyer pointed out that it's supposed to be sort of similar to like Daisy Jones and the Six. At least that's what the blurb will tell you. But you get into the book and it's nothing like Daisy Jones and the Six. It's completely false advertising. The book is like complete literary, I won't say garbage, but it was just very boring. The way that it was sold to me was that it was like this family that's hiding this rock star in the 70s, and they gotta like hide him out because he's in rehab, and it's supposed to be like fun adventures with the rock star of him telling stories. But like the first 4 to 5 chapters was literally just this 12-year-old girl, or maybe she's not 12, I don't know how old she is, but she's babysitting this 5-year-old, and it's literally just them walking around. And it was so boring, and I was so disappointed. I really wanted to love that book, but it had nothing to do with the rock star. It is nothing like Daisy Jones and the Six. And I was super disappointed. Easy DNF. And then I DNF'd All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which is the first Murderbot novella. And for a while I heard like nothing but good things about Murderbot. But then a couple people started coming out saying like, oh yeah, this is really boring. Like this, I don't understand why people like this. So I was very compelled to listen to it on audio, because I think I picked up the audio for like $2 or $3 on Audible when they had a sale. So I picked it up and I listened to it, and yeah, it's incredibly boring. It's not funny like a lot of people say it is. I didn't laugh one time. It was super dull, and the narrator didn't really do a great job either of like bringing out the humor of the story. It's one of those things where I'm just baffled why people love it so much. I don't understand. But yeah, that was an easy DNF too. I got like, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes into that, listening to it, and I was just like, no, I'm done. Whew. So yeah, those are all my DNFs for the month. Yeah, that was crazy DNFing. Like, I never DNF this much. But yeah, for those particular books and stories, I couldn't do it. All right, so let's continue on with stuff that I actually read and enjoyed this month, including our continued read-along of Skeleton Crew for the Stephen King Short Story Book Club that I'm running. And this month in May was a mixed bag, but some really good ones and then some meh ones. Easily a lot of people's favorite Stephen King short story is Survivor Type, which we read this month. Very good, very disgusting, and very gruesome. A lot of people love it. There was also Nona, which was really good. The Reaper's Image, a lot of people loved that one. And then you got ones like Uncle Otto's Truck, which was the last one we read, which was fine. It was kind of meh. And then For Owen, which is like a 2-page poem, which is kind of dumb. And then Beach World I liked. I don't think a lot of people loved it, but it reminded me a lot of like Ray Bradbury, who I love. So yeah, it's been kind of all over the place this month. And then for June, we will be finishing up in June, and then starting in July, we'll carry over to Nightmares and Dreamscapes. So yeah, Skeleton Crew is still going good. The next book I have to talk about is not a book that I own physically. My girlfriend Stacy read this to me via Discord chat, and we had a pretty good time with it, although not really a favorite of ours. And that would be In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This was a newer thriller. I think it came out like 1 or 2 years ago, and it was pretty good. Like, it had a great start to it, and the characters were interesting enough. But for me and her, there were some weird like world building issues, which like normally world building issues is like a fantasy thing. Like, oh, it's too drawn out, or oh, I need more of it. But you don't really get that with thrillers too often, right? Because how do you get the world wrong? It's Earth. But like the timelines just felt weird because the author kept making weird references to things that didn't make any sense. Like the story is supposed to take place in like the late 2000s in like the past timeline, and then the late 2010s, which is like the present. And it's supposed to flip back and forth. But the references she was making made it seem like it was the 90s and then the early 2000s. Because like they're like college kids in like 2009 do not carry around boom boxes. But apparently this author thinks they do. And then just weird references. And then like there's things at the end of the book where like a character, like if they just had their cell phone, like they would have been able to do something. And you're just like, how do these kids not have cell phones? what are they doing? So there was just random crap like that that would take us out of the story, and she would literally just stop, like, wait a minute, what is this character doing? Why are they saying this, or why are they thinking that? It wasn't terribly great, but at the same time, like, the mystery aspect of it was still engaging enough for us to, finish it. And the ending was a little messy, and like the reason why someone was doing something was a little convoluted. So it wasn't great, but I still had a fun time listening to her read me the story. Hopefully the next one we read will be a little better though, but I still had a great time. This next book is one of the main reasons why I didn't get nearly as much reading done as I was hoping to, because it's a long book. It's a chunky book, and for some strange reason, I felt the need to read and finish it in the month of May, which I am turning into more of a mood reader, right? So I was like, all right, I'm in the mood for it. I might as well read it now. And that would be Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson, the third Malazan Book of the Fallen book. And yes, I read this chunk of a book, this beast of a book, in its entirety in the month of May. Like 900 pages, 45 hours of audio. And I'm glad I did, because I was definitely in the mood to read and finish it. But sadly enough, this is actually my least favorite Malazan book I've read so far. And like I said, it's the third one. I gave the first two, Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates, 4 stars, whereas this one was 3.5 stars. It had really great and outstanding moments, and really cool characters, and really cool stuff like the Kachain Chamala, which were just awesome, and just had some really outstanding like moments. But overall, there are a lot of scenes that I felt were unnecessary, or characters that I just didn't really particularly care about, and it definitely dragged on and on. And just for reference, like, the audiobook for Dead House Gates was like 36 hours, and this one was like 45 hours, and I could feel its length. That's what she said. But yeah, it's just a beast of a book, and it felt overly long, which, of course, if you know my Stephen King unpopular opinions, I hate when books feel unnecessarily long, like The Stand. But yeah, that's my main complaint with this book, is that it's super long. I'm very lucky in that book 4 and 5 are actually, like, I think the shortest in the series, besides Gardens of the Moon. I think House of Chains is like 35 hours audio, and then Midnight Tides is 31 hours. Like, those are gonna feel like a walk in the park compared to Memories of Ice. And then after that, it'll be, 45-hour audiobooks for me. Oh dear. Next book I have to talk about is a novella, which was just released by one of my new favorite authors, Zoe Stage, and that would be The Girl Who Outgrew the World. And this one is very interesting because it's not like a typical Zoe Stage book. It has horror elements to it, but really it's more of like a weird fairy tale kind of book, like a modern fairy tale. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe this book, but it's not the typical horror book that you would write, like Wonderland or Baby Teeth, right? But I was still very much interested. I pre-ordered it the minute I knew of its release, and I am glad that I read it, because I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Not perfect by any means, especially because of the ending. The ending just was really weird and out there, and yeah, it didn't ruin the book, but it definitely took me out of the story. I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Why is this happening? Oh, but I loved this book because of the characters. You've got Lily, who is this, preteen girl who just literally keeps growing and growing, and no one really knows why. And she has to deal with it, but her positive attitude, it's so inspiring. And I really liked her character, and she didn't really kind of put up with a lot of crap. She just kind of like took everything in stride, and just, I loved her character. But probably my favorite character to read about in here is Lily's father, James. And it's interesting because I've read 3 Zoe Stage novels that are out now, and she always writes in female perspectives, but this was the first time she wrote in a male perspective. And it was very interesting because the guy is a very conflicting, morally gray character, because you've got one end of him who like really loves his daughter and really wants the best for her, and she just kind of wants a normal life for her. But at the same time, you read his inner thoughts and he is terrified of her because how big she's gotten, and kind of just how he hates himself because he just wants a normal daughter. And I really liked reading his character. And yeah, I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in this concept. I think Zoe Stage is a terrific writer. Absolutely, well, not absolutely, but I really love this novella. And she also has a new book coming out next year on Valentine's Day. And I think it's called Mothered. And I am super excited. Anything Zoe Stage, I will be reading. And definitely pick this one up if you're interested. Next book I have to talk about is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I picked this book up on the recommendation of Stacy. She really liked this, and I really liked it as well. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's sort of like a young adult mystery thriller kind of book, but the reason I loved it so much, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that chunks of this book are written in like podcast style. And I also listened to it on audio, so it literally sounded like a podcast. And you've got like people interviewing people, and I really like the overall atmosphere and experience of listening to the audiobook as if it's like an actual podcast. But for me, like when I first started, I was really enjoying the podcast elements, and then when we would get to the parts of the story that were written from Sadie's perspective, I was like, oh, I kind of want the podcast. But her chapters definitely got better and better and better. And as you get through the story, it gets more gripping and more gripping the more you learn about her past and about her story. And I think some people don't love the ending because it is more of an open ending. But I love when an author can pull off like a really good open ending. And I think the author did just that with this. So that's what kind of elevated it from being like a 4-star read to more of a 4.5-star read for me. I really enjoyed this one. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's interested in like young adult thrillers. This is probably the best one you're going to get. All right, the next book I have to talk about is a reread for me, and that would be Wizard and Glass by Stephen King, the 4th Dark Tower book. And I gave this one 4.5 stars this time. I think that's what I normally give it, just because books 2 and 3 are like definite 5 stars for me. But Wizard and Glass I've always loved, but not quite on the same level as books 2 and 3. And this book is definitely very divisive for Dark Tower fans. You either get people that love this book and it's their favorite book in the series, or they hate it, or they really dislike it because it's such a different story, and it's just so different than what the rest of the Dark Tower series is. You get a lot of people who love it, like me, and then you get a lot of people who are like, I don't give a shit. And I know Andrew has recently read this, and he really did not like it very much. I think he's a bit of a prude, but whatever, because there's a lot of sex stuff in here. But it's okay, Andrew. It's okay for people to have occasional wrong opinions, but you just got to admit that you're wrong, you know? So, yeah. But anyway, I'm one of the people that actually love this book. But like I said, books 2 and 3 are slightly better in my opinion. I really do like this book, really love this book, but definitely when you get to the middle of the book, you can kind of feel its length a little bit. It's like 900 pages, goes on maybe a bit too long, but I think for a King book being this long, I still think it reads fairly quickly. And of course, Frank Muller doing the first 4 Dark Tower books on audio are just tremendous. And yes, I love reading this book. I think I've read it twice now, maybe 3 times. I don't know, but still, of course I love the Dark Tower series, right? And the last book that I managed to finish this month, or at least the last book I'm going to talk about here, that I finished because it's probably my favorite read of the month is The Escape Room by Megan Golden. This was a thriller that a few people have really read. A few people that I know have read this, including Stacy and Sharon. They loved this book, and I loved this book too. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's a thriller, and basically the main things you need to know is like it's a lot of office politics, and you've got like I think it's like 4 or 5 people basically locked in an elevator, and it's like an escape room kind of style. But you also get flashbacks to like this one character and kind of like their up and coming in the business that they work in. And it was really good. And the ending is one of my all-time favorite thriller endings ever now. The ending is what really makes this book for me. Like at the beginning, like when you're first reading it, it can be kind of slow and a little boring because you're still figuring out like how everything connects and why any of this matters. But when you get to the halfway point, something happens, and then you get to the ending, and it just blew me away. And I really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend it to anyone who loves crazy thrillers. I loved it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And there's also 2 books that I started in the month of May that I will have to carry over into the month of June because I didn't have enough time to finish them in the month of May. And one of them will be Desperation, which is the winner in May for the Patreon Stephen King wheel spin thingy that I do for my patrons every month. And yeah, I still have like 150, maybe like 200 pages left in that one. So I will finish this first thing in the beginning parts of June. Yes, I'm very much enjoying it more the second time than I did the first time. It's very bonkers. It's very crazy. Still not one of my all-time favorite King books, but I am enjoying it. Definitely. And then the other book is The Patience of a Dead Man by Michael Clark. And me and Stacy have been reading this to each other, but we've been a little busy. So we haven't quite finished it. I think we have like 85 pages left. So not very much. So we'll finish it like near the beginning of June. And then also we'll be continuing on with the sequel, which Sharon gladly gifted Stacy for her birthday, so we'll be continuing with that. But yeah, that's all of the books I have to talk about in this wrap-up. So yeah, overall, a weird, interesting, crazy month for reading for me. Not only just because I haven't really been doing that much reading the past couple of weeks because Stacy's been here visiting me, but also I've DNF'd a lot of books. And then I, for some reason, decided to read Malazan, which I did not plan on doing, which was very strange, but also fairly rewarding. But yeah, hopefully June will be a much more productive month for me. And I think I'm going to be participating in the Whatever-thon read-along that's going down on someone's channel. I don't know, but Stacy wanted me to join her for that, so I will. And for that one, that's more of like a competition-based thing where like you get more points. So the goal is to try to read like more shorter books and read them very quickly. So I think for my June TBR, it's just going to be a lot of short books. So that'll be fun. So no Malazan, no super long King books. So I think I will have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Please let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about here and what you thought about them. Leave all of that shenanigans down in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Bookastromer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me financially, go check out my Patreon page and see what that's all about. But anyway, thank you so much for watching and have a terrific day. Ooh la la. I don't know why it said it like that.